Good to see you. Things. How's the new venture?
It's going. I mean, Monday was my
first official day.
Yeah.
It's probably really weird. That first day was like.
Well, it was also my birthday on Monday, so I was just like, what do I do? So I went to Enchanted Rock and ate a bunch of different worlds.
There you go. It's a good way to celebrate the first day.
It's hard to imagine. It's going well. I mean, trying to find gigs and stuff, but I'm gonna work a little bit with Jackrabbit for April, and then maybe have some stuff on Right. Start networking.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you doing?
Good. Good. Working on actually marketing. So I'm getting into digital marketing. I did a lot of that for Jackrabbit. I've been really interested in it. So that's where I'm. So analytics, ads, all that kind of shit. I'm too old for that program, so I'm probably not getting back into development.
Jackrabbit's just not the same without you.
Different. I saw LeBron.
LeBron left, and then Grayson put in his notice.
They threw him out.
I think he got a job California as an EM somewhere.
Like $1 billion.
Jeez.
It's 9 people. I mean, you were 9. You're the first one to go.
Yeah. Jeez.
Jojo, sort of. He went on a honeymoon, for like a year or so. I think it's pretty much out of there. And Grayson, Dan, me, Brian.
Do they do that themselves or does their own secretary?
And then like people that like hired out
Wish him the best.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Saying you're ready to take that. Yes, me too.
40-hour.
Do you have any interesting projects you picked up so far?
There's one that's kind of cool. It's actually
While you're
like IoT products and stuff like that. So every once in a while they need like that. So I'm looking for hopefully they're still finishing up the hardware. So we started last week and now it's like maybe it's really
I had one person that I talked to about the marketing stuff who was doing something. Maybe that's right. And all the other side, maybe that's right. Female entrepreneur. I was like, when you get that point, let me know. The email's not up yet.
Because we changed the server and installed the DNS right now, so if you email it, Ben and I started that back in August. Never really did it.
So he's doing this full time too?
Yeah, he quit his job too, so.
Little tag team going on?
Yeah.
They have that many people
And doing the same thing, picking up gigs and trying to work out. Yeah, and he doing pretty packaged. Yeah.
I'm only 13.
Yeah, so hopefully by the end of this week they should have back up. But it's been so awkward. People are emailing me and I have to email them with different emails. Like, hey, sorry.
Yeah, like forwarding set up and things. So
No, because he did it without telling me. And get together and it was like not working. Oh, I didn't know you were using that.
all the leads.
Yeah.
I just put up your website and marketing stuff, and the first few days before I got all the accounts set up, I just fucked them all and just forwarding mine like every email address. So like I got a couple emails like your stuff like that. I might seem weird, but
Yeah.
And actually,
I saw you got a new website.
Website up,
Yeah.
that was my
yeah,
project
but
this
it won't work, so they say it'll
It's called Modern Media.
Nice.
start a campaign, bring back I will.
Well, that's awesome. I'll let you know.
You build them on Monday.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta go
And
to
you
the
fly out too.
Yeah, I can use some.
Okay, we'll see.
How's that been? You guys launched?
Yeah, we launched.
Great software.
Yeah. It's very niche market.
Yeah.
I also doing there something different. Isn't your co-founder, the guy, crowdfunding?
Yeah. So you take it to the next level and really advance it. I was talking to the founder.
He's here.
Founded Incubator. And his idea was white packaging.
I'm excited to see the demo of that.
Replace the banks and venture capitalists.
Oh, that's always the idea for
Yeah. Now you
work in the aviation industry.
it's actually the banks, the venture capitalists, the ones that that's the product, and then see if they want to fund it. So, and usually that's the way it works. It's not
handling business, which is so big.
So his concept was you didn't work that early.
People can all do it together. There's cards around there, closer to level.
I'm not worried about the bank. They got a lot of money. They're good. Not only that, they keep their 18
People come from work. When I first started learning, when to go like a game wrap up,
Anything that's still here these days.
maybe she should.
because I'm a handler and a pilot.
Seems like that's where my successful money.
There's a lot of work.
Well, James Stewart just started on the bank.
But we have to
It's a good opportunity to replace it with something like this. Data validation.
And like most of the work is just like figuring out how it works for everyone. It's like all of these people are doing the same work. So we're just gonna do it once. Once we use our automated system.
different services.
If you ever seen, if you ever get myself giving money.
So every country just got to follow these.
Yeah.
So whatever is a rule here, have to be.
Okay, well I gotta get to some of the. All right,
But
so.
every country has a system and unlimited natural. That's what sustainability. Looking for those details, but all of them are on paper. They're very nice.
Good one start.
Who wants to go first?
I can go first.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Austin iPhone Developers Meetup Group. My name's Anthony. We are back in Capital Factory this month. Last month we were over at Fiber Cove. We had a bunch of cool show and tell demos. Today we have a couple cool presentations. David's doing one on a new app they're launching, and Murray's doing one on Swift closures. So for anybody whose first time that is here, we're here first Tuesday of every month in Capital Factory talking about apps and iPhones. I'll let David start off.
Hey everyone, nice to see you all today. So I'm really happy and excited to kind of share with people what I've been working on. So Digital Handler is kind of my side project app I've been working on for over a year and a half, and just last month we launched it, and now kind of figuring out the marketing, but there's already a lot of kind of stuff that I've experienced through the process, and so today I want to just share everyone kind of the background of the app and then also give a little demo of what the app looks like. So first of all, a little background on me, kind of my entrepreneurial journey thus far. So I started off, or actually kind of before that, just my day job is VP of Engineering at Jackrabbit Mobile. We're a company that builds apps for other companies, so we do kind of a full service for you. We have designers, we figure out kind of what your business needs in an app, then we build the app, we test the app, and we distribute the app. So that's what I do Monday to Friday. And then on the weekends, I've been working on my digital handler app, but in the past I've worked on some other kind of projects. So, and the first thing I did was a website called Click512. Started this in 2006. And the idea for that business was, it was like a MySpace for your business. So kind of in 2006, like there was like a lot of businesses that didn't even have websites, or if they did have a website, it'd be out of date because they couldn't contact their web developer, or there'd be the wrong hours on their website. And so I thought, let me just make a kind of a directory where every business can have their own kind of customizable page. That made $0 in revenue. The next thing I worked on though, because I did talk to a lot of businesses that I tried to sell this to, and businesses did have interest in like having websites. They just like wanted like specific things. They like wanted to have the MLS listings on their website because they're a realtor. Or they wanted to have a way to book appointments. And so I did throughout high school and then into college to get a lot of web development kind of contracts, and I did all that through a company I called Sunrise Development. And so I made $20,000 on that. Pretty good for mostly a high school job. And then next thing I worked on though, this was while I was going to school at UT. I found a pretty good logo designer in the Philippines, and she made logos for like business logos for $4, including like revisions and vector files and everything. So I was like, oh, this is really cool. Maybe I could like sell this to all these businesses that I've been working with. And so I made a website, and I had like some different packages you could choose from. And it was only $50 to $100 for a logo. So that's kind of the next business that I did, and that one I made about $3,000. But I was kind of wanting to do something kind of less like just services to businesses, and so I wanted to do something more product, like just build a product, make it really good, and just have people buy it without me having like kind of heard each one of the customers through like personally with all these emails and stuff. And so towards the end of college, I found kind of an opportunity in textbooks. So I noticed that people were selling their textbooks on Craigslist for less than they cost on Amazon. And so with that opportunity, I just bought a bunch of books from people and then sold them on Amazon. And then I built an app where you could actually yourself just scan your books and sell them online. That app is still out there. That one's still making money. And the way it works is people you use the app to sell your book, and when you do sell your book, I actually get a 5% commission on each of the books that get sold. That's the app that people still use. And I've already done a whole meetup talk on that one, I think probably like a year ago. So on that business, I've made $11,000 so far. Still makes about like $100 a month I haven't updated the app in 2 years. I haven't marketed anything, so I'd like to have a few more of those businesses. And then the last major app that I worked on was an app called Free2Go. With that one, that was, if you're familiar with the car sharing network Car2Go, they let you rent cars by the minute. You can kind of pick them up anywhere, drop them off anywhere. They used to have this way where you could use the credit card inside the car to refuel it and get free minutes. I used that. I got about like $5,000 to $10,000 worth of free drive time, so it was really good for me. But then I also sold the app on the App Store, ranging from like $3 to $10 is what I charged at different times for that app, and people bought that because it enabled you to get free minutes on Car2Go. So in the life of that, I made $2,500. But they did end up changing the rules, so you can't do that anymore.
I was a frequent user back in the day.
And then so I partnered with Felipe. He's sitting here on the front row. He's the aviation expert. He's been in aviation for 26 years, and he ran and operated a ground handling company for 17 years. And ground handling that's kind of the company that the pilot hires to take care of all the ground stuff. So putting the bags into the plane, fueling the plane, I think like food services, as well as like paperwork and stuff. That's all handled by the ground handling company. And that's where we get our name, Digital Handler. We're like the digital version of that company. And we right now we're mostly focused on the paperwork parts, but I think in the future we'll probably also be able to kind of give and provide the fueling and the food and whatever else you need, through partnerships. And he's built so far 6 different aviation apps, and so I guess now this will be your seventh aviation app. So where did Digital Handler start? So back in 2015, I kind of finished with all of those things I've listed. I kind of had worked through those, and I didn't really see any of them being scalable or making enough money where I could live off just that. And so I wanted to make like a more significant effort to kind of launch a business that that could be profitable. And so throughout 2015, I was kind of thinking and kind of talking to a lot of different people, reading blogs and talking to professionals. And I kind of realized I think a really good path to go down for a software business is to find some kind of professional workflow that people are doing in their day-to-day work, and find a way to improve that, and then sell a product that improves it. So kind of in 2015, did a lot of research, and I found doctors they had a big need. They, like a lot of like Obamacare, Affordable Care Act rules had come into effect where everything had to be paperless, kind of all the records had to be digital, and so I saw like opportunity to do something with that, and I talked to a bunch of different doctors, and they all said like the data is digitized and it's in there, but it's not searchable. So I'd like to, it'd be way more useful if I could like Command F, find some information, but that's not possible. It's like all in different data warehouses, and a lot of it's like PDFs that don't have text isn't searchable. So that's kind of what I centered on. I was already starting to do research on that, and that's when in fall 2015 at this meetup I met Felipe, and he told me about a different industry that had also had a kind of common workflow that needed improvement, and no one was doing anything about it. So that interested me. Since what specifically interested me was that every day there's 400 private flights that leave the United States. So I was like 400. If every one of those, or if some of those can pay some money, that sounds like a good industry. It's 400 flights a day means 400 pilots doing hours of paperwork. So it takes for most flights, there's about 15 hours of paperwork you have to do in order to do your flight. So specifically, this is for international flights. So if you're a pilot here and you've got a flight scheduled in 2 weeks going to Guatemala, then you've got to, well, first of all, if you've done a flight before, maybe it's kind of easy, but if you've never been to Guatemala, you need to research kind of what paperwork you need to give them. You need to collect information about your passengers, you need to get the aircraft information, you got to find the right forms, fill them out, email them, kind of make sure a bunch of stuff's happening. You got to research weather, you got to kind of find out about the runway you're going to be landing at, a bunch of different information, and that takes about 15 hours. And so 15 hours times 400 pilots, lots of work that I think we can totally improve with some technology.
That's every day.
Yeah, so every day 400 flights, and actually depending on which kind of information you go by, it's between 400 and 1,000 private jet flights leaving the United States every day. So paperwork problems, that's what I wanted to solve, and that's what I think Digital Handler does solve. So some details on those paperwork problems. Number one is that there's different paperwork for every country. So there are like some standard rules that have been published by the international aviation authorities, and there is some consistency, but every country kind of has their own take on it, and they have different PDF forms you need to fill out, and they have kind of just small differences between each of them. So if if you are going to a new country, you can't just like send it to one place. You have to find the right place to send it, you have to find the right paperwork, and then based on how most pilots are doing it, you spend 15 hours in Microsoft Word. So that's, you know, copying and pasting information. You might have the information for the aircraft because you're usually using the same one, but you need to take that information and put it into the form for the country you're going to. And then for each of your passengers, you know, you got to do the same thing. And you know, you'll probably commonly have different passengers for each of your flights, so you're going to have to, you know, even if there are some same passengers that are coming back, maybe there are different combinations. So every time there's paper, and it takes multiple days to get all that lined up.
So you're aiming at a guy who's like a pilot / owner of a jet.
Yes.
You're not aiming at like a rich guy who owns a plane and has a pilot on standby.
Right. So if you're a rich guy with your own plane and you fly it, then you have to do this paperwork. If you're a rich guy with a pilot, then your pilot does the paperwork.
Okay.
Yep. So lots of time in Word. That's a paperwork problem. Transcription errors is another paperwork problem. So, like I said, copying and pasting stuff is not very exact, and I think maybe if you're transcribing something once, you'll be really careful about it. But if you're doing it over and over again and for hours, there's going to be errors. And so with our system, you put your information in once. And then another challenge of the way that most pilots do it is when you're working on the road. You know, if you're flying around to different countries, you have to find a place where you can work. You have to find Wi-Fi, and so I think there's ways to improve that as well. So what is our solution? Our solution is 30 minutes. That's how long it takes to add a whole flight with new passengers you've never used before, a new aircraft you've never used before, and a new flight. So if you're reusing an aircraft you've used before, if you've got passengers you've used before, this gets cut down even more. I think once you know how to use the app and it's a flight that you're requesting with passengers and pilots you already have, you can do it in 2 minutes. You can put in the information for that flight, select the pre-entered aircraft and pilots and people, and it's really quick. Another benefit with ours is no research. We've done the research for you to fly to every country, and we have an automated system that has all the PDFs loaded in, and it fills in the form, the information that you submit into those forms, submits it to the aviation authorities. We have weather map sources. We have all the runway information, all of that, everything that you need. We've already got there, and we are continually maintaining it. So things change. We keep our stuff up to date. And no transcription. So like I said, you just put it in once. As long as you're careful about putting it in, there's not going to be any transcription errors because you only have to do it once. And then finally, it's in your pocket. So you can kind of wherever you're at, you can kind of work on your entering your information. So maybe if you get an email from one of your customers that they want to fly to Mexico next week, and you're in Cuba right now, you can still kind of get everything ready to go on your phone, while you're sitting in the airport somewhere. And if, for example, if you have like T-Mobile, which is what I have, you have free data in 140 countries, so don't even have to worry about finding Wi-Fi, because with T-Mobile, for example, you have internet everywhere. And so after all is said and done, you submit that information to us, and we get back to you with a PDF. So 53 pages is one of the ones that we did, and that that depends on how many passengers and so forth you have. But we kind of give you a PDF of everything for your flight. So we have like the airport information, we have the flight plan for you, general declaration, which is a piece of paper that you have to print out and have on hand when you land. You have to give it kind of to officials that meet you at the gate. We have the weather maps, we have the weight and balance for your aircraft, so you know how to place the luggage and people sitting in your aircraft for optimal safety.
So do you print it before you go on the plane, or do you print in flight?
So the thing that you do need to print is the general declaration. So that's just one page out of that PDF. And so we would recommend that you have like a portable printer that you can have for that case.
Yeah. So most people bring like one on the plane with them, or like at the airport or something.
I don't think most pilots have a portable printer, but that's something that if because most people are they're already gonna have to like go through all this stuff to even find a computer, so printer's not gonna be that much harder. But I think once you have everything mobile, you're probably then also gonna want to have the mobile printer just to give you the complete setup. And there's lots of other cool technology you can get. There's a magnetic ink reader that you can get for the iPhone, and with the way that passports work, if you've ever seen, there's like 2 lines of ink on the side of kind of underneath all your photo information of like, it's like the same data that's up top. There's actually magnetic ink readers where you slide it through and it actually reads the letters in magnetic ink. So that's kind of a possible technology that we'd like to integrate with in the future, where instead of even having to enter the information by hand, you can actually slide a passport through the scanner and on the iPhone directly import it into an app.
That's cool. Yeah.
And then with the there's also kind of like baggage tag printers, which we'd like to do in the future, where if you have the baggage tag information for your passengers, you can print that out through kind of like a hip side printer or whatever. So if you want to be really fancy,
We're gonna get one of those.
So what does this cost? The cost to use our app is $150 per flight, and while I was really excited to hear that that's a reasonable price when I talked to Felipe. It's actually, if you're a pilot and you don't want to do those 3 days of work, you can kind of email your information and kind of have someone do it for you, and I think our solution is way more convenient to use because it's like all kind of with you, and it's a lot easier to make a change within the app rather than having to like talk to some third-party person to make changes with them. But if you are going to hire a third-party person, that usually runs between $450 and $700 for someone to do. So I think our $150 price is going to not cause anyone to complain. And so the app is live. If you go to digitalhandler.com, you can download the app. And that's what the App Store page looks like. And I have the app on my phone, so I can show it. So this is the app here. It's called Digital Handler. Very simple color scheme so far, just black and white. And just a few different tables, but we do have push notifications built in the app. So if as your flight information changes, as your permit gets approved, all those types of things, you do get push notifications in the app.
So that's just a tab bar controller controlling
yes.
table views and some other stuff.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So very simple layout in this app, but it kind of gives you everything you need. So as a pilot, the first time you're using the app, you're going to want to add your aircraft. So here I've added an aircraft already. There's a few dozen fields that are actually required. So that's why I said that it does take 30 minutes the first time you're doing a flight. But luckily, once you put in an aircraft once, you're not gonna need it in the future.
Can you download this on different devices? So if you got one iPhone and another iPhone, does it show up on both iPhones?
Yeah, we don't have syncing yet. So right now it is just locally stored. So you can have the app on multiple devices, and it supports iPad, but there's no syncing yet. Kind of some information that we collect, and this was kind of a fun kind of exercise in different table setups. So I have, because this is the iPhone meetup, I can go into a little bit of detail on some of the different input methods there are. So I have, for aircraft types, for example, we have all of the aircraft types that we support in here, and you can search by any string. So if you want to find something, you can search in here, and you can kind of change what's selected. And because this is a this is kind of like a preset list, you can't add anything to it. The plus button up there is grayed out. Then we also have, for example, though, if you want to go to a list where you can add things, like for example, like a actually flight. So aircraft, you can. So used for flights. So this used for flights cell here, this will show you what flights this aircraft is being used for. And so because flights are something that you can add, there's a plus button up here, and that'll add it within there. And what I used here was I used I think this is like iOS 8 feature, which is with core data you can have child contexts now, and so it creates you've got like a main context, which is all of your flight data, but then when you can actually within the aircraft you can add a flight that like creates a child context where you can enter information in, and if you hit cancel, it just like discards that child context, but if you hit save, it like merges that information into the parent context, and that enables me to do, like, while you're in a flight you can select the aircraft and you can add an aircraft, and then while you're in the aircraft you can find the flights that it's used for, and then add a flight. So it's like, it allows nestings like that. Although I think most users are probably not going to do that. So other interesting or kind of useful things that I did in here, if we go to flights, I have kind of a date picker in here. What I ended up doing here is I have like one cell that just gets inserted in there, and that's kind of what I found was the best way to do that. And so that's mainly the kind of the UI for entering information. So now there's also photos. So there's support for attaching photos. So if you have a person that you want to use as a pilot, you have to enter in their you have to take a photo of their license. So you can take a photo, or you can choose a photo from the library. And but yeah, so once you've finished adding all your people and your aircraft, you go and kind of compose the flight. From there, this is actually a pretty short list. So luckily, with aircraft and people, you kind of need a lot of information. But flight, it's actually really short. You just need origin, destination. You need the times that your flight's going to be occurring. You need some route information. That's something that's kind of just a sequence of letters that the pilots will all know what route they're taking. You need to fill in a purpose, so this is another one of those just predetermined fields, so there's no option to add a purpose. There's just the preset purposes. And yeah, you can go into here and you can set who your pilot is. Here, so for passengers, there's you can have multiple passengers. So in the passenger screen, you can select and deselect as many as you want. With the pilot in command, you can only have one. So if you select a different pilot, it'll switch. And what I kind of the interesting way that I did kind of approach this type of relationship is actually all of the data model for the app is in core data, and it kind of inspects the data model when it's creating the screen. And if that relationship is a one-to-one relationship, it'll only allow you to select one. And if it's a one-to-many relationship in core data, it'll kind of drive the UI. And so that's kind of what works for all of these. So if I make any changes to the core data model, it'll automatically add a form. And then depending if it's a date, then I'll put in a date below there. If it's a it's a string, I'll do a string. So that's kind of the way that I kind of built up this architecture. And then kind of the final workflow here is like once you've got your flight all ready to go, you hit request landing permit here in the top right, and that'll take you into kind of the request flow. So you need to put in a contact email. That's pre-filled if you've used it before, and then it checks with our server to see what the fee is. Some countries charge like a fee to get the permit as well, and so we kind of add that to our 150. But for this airport that we're using here, it's just 150. And if you hit next there, that's kind of like saying, cool, I like that price. Then here I use Stripe for the payment integration. So you can change to a different credit card. You can add a new card in here. All of this stuff is UI provided by Stripe. And then you can hit Pay Now. That will charge your card, upload the image attachments, and then request the permit. And then you go back to here, it'll say requested, and then as that moves through and gets submitted, the state will show up, and then once everything's approved and you have your permit number will show up in here, and you'll get an email with all of that information that you need for your flight.
Earlier iOS versions, did Apple require you to do an in-app purchase for that ever? Or have the rules changed on that?
Yeah, so I think we're not really selling a feature in the app, right? We're just like selling the service, and we're like saying it's like for a permit. So that's why I think they didn't have any problem with that. And like if you look at the screenshots, it's clearly in the screenshots like Visa card. So yeah, they didn't have anything to say about using that.
Is there any special security or encryption you had to do for just like being in like the airline industry and all that?
No, there's not any special encryption that's required, but we have like a list of kind of security practices that we're following. So and that's kind of more just like when our customers do come to us and like, hey, how secure is this? We can tell them. But basically, yeah. So everything is SSL communication to the server, and we have like rules about kind of who is allowed to access your data and for what purposes, and you know, things are. Like we also like on the part. This is using parse for the server, so I also made sure that all the permissions in there wouldn't allow anyone to access the data without having the correct authority. And then what's our marketing plan? So now that we have the app on the store, we have gotten a few downloads, but no pilots requesting permits yet. And so I think the reason is it's kind of, maybe people are playing around with it, but it's a big commitment to kind of put in all of your passenger information into the system, and then to like rely on it to kind of take all of that responsibility. Because if our app messes up your flight, like you're gonna lose like thousands of dollars in revenue, and you're gonna have angry customers. So I think there is kind of like a hurdle of having to convince the pilots like this is a legit solution. This is gonna make your life way easier. You really do want to be using this. So right now we're working on a website to communicate all that to our potential customers. And that one thing that I talked with Steven earlier, and he recommended white labeling could be a cool option. So those people that are charging $700 a flight, maybe we can sell to their customers directly and like share the profit with them. I think that could be a good marketing option. Once we do have that website up though, there is a aircraft owners and pilot association that has like over 1 million members. And they have really like high engagement with their website, with their newsletter, with their published magazines. They have a bunch of different published magazines. And They even have a pilot guide to the Bahamas and the Caribbean, which I think would fit really well with our customers, because all those are different countries. You need permits for each one of them. And so I think once we do have a website that we can send people to and that convinces them to use our product, then I think we're going to kind of invest in some paid advertising with them. And then future features, so I kind of
going back to the marketing.
Yeah.
Have you thought about tying in with some influential pilot? I think giving him a free shot, him or her giving him a free shot at it.
Yes. Yeah. So we've identified some people that actually write for the magazine, and we want to get them to use the app. Definitely. But I think probably having a website will also make it a lot more convincing to even those pilots.
Felipe needs to leave a 5-star review on the.
Yeah. We already have 2 5-star reviews.
Yeah?
I did one
awesome.
of them, one of my friends did that one.
Have you thought about giving away the first one?
Yes,
Let them
we did.
try it.
Yeah, we actually, Felipe has like a credit card maker at his house, and we thought about like making like a gift card and like sending it to pilots. Like, here's the gift card, use it kind of for your first flight, get $150 off, kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
There's countries like Cuba that charge you more than $100 per this permit, so we can give them for free.
Can't be completely free, but we can give them $150 off. Yeah. And so future features, I kind of already talked about them earlier. So I think the magnetic ink reader will be really good to integrate with. Those cost like $800 for the hardware. But again, I think if you can like just swipe people's passport and just have them directly into it, could be worth it for pilots. And the baggage tag printer. So once we, I think, yes.
Is the magnetic ink the same thing that's printed on, like you get the passport number and the name and stuff?
Yes. Yeah. There's like a system where I think there's like certain dots within the actual ink, or something. It's something like that, but. Yeah, it's like a credit card swiper, but it can read the ink.
So I was going to ask, is there something that it gives you that you can't do if you like take a picture of the passport page and like read the text from there?
You could, but I think we don't want any errors. Like it's very important not to have any errors, and so I think the software is like not good enough to always kind of have the right information from just taking a picture. And like there are like, especially like kind of stuff that you could get for free or open source. We did talk to a company that does like ID scanning for like if you like have like the Geico app and you like get into an accident, you can like scan the other driver's information or something, and that app will like pull it all out within the app. And I think we talked to them that it was like $500,000 to license it. So I think I'd rather have the pilots pay $800 for the hardware.
Passports wouldn't have like the reflective stuff on it, so it might be hard to take a picture of it. Security features on it.
Yeah, that could be that too. But I mean, and maybe we can find a better deal on the hardware, because I feel like that's overpriced. $800. Like maybe there's someone in China that makes them cheaper, and we can kind of resell them as like part of the whole package. Yeah, I think it's just cool that works, and like every passport it's like very standard. Like they all have the exact same font that they use, and so that's why it's possible to scan it like that. And then another thing that we definitely want to integrate with is just more data sources. So right now you have to enter a lot of your information in, but I think there are data sources where we could pull in like aircraft information, where maybe you just put in your like tail number and serial number or something, and then it can pull in a lot more of the information, and so that would cut down on the effort to add flight. But I think at this point, like we really invest a lot of engineering effort, and right now I think we're just getting the most out of working on marketing.
What's that app, the iPad app that all the pilots use for like their flight paths?
Fort Flight?
Fort Flight?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to try to partner with them or something.
Yeah. definitely. Cool, so expect more updates in the future, and that's all I have to share for today.
I like your logo. Is that from the Philippines?
No, it's free.
That cost you $4.
I made that in sketch.
Nice. Cool. Ready to go next?
Just about.
You did yourself?
Yeah.
Nice. What's that? What's this?
This is deck set. And so,
I think I've seen you use that before.
yeah, so it turns Markdown into presentation.
That's pretty good. I like that. It's like I used it like tech. It was like programming for like academic paper.
Yeah, and I like they do like this.
Yeah, that was great.
And then you can like change themes. So if you like finish the presentation, like maybe this is like too black, and you change it to red, yellow. Or then we like change it to like this thing.
Is that like how do you tell?
Did everybody read that?
It's on the app.
As good as it gets.
Yeah.
Make it a little bigger.
Not sure how. That's the large presentation font. I guess we
It looks fine on the first row.
can. Yeah, move up. If that's possible. All right. Thanks for coming to my talk, and thanks to David and Anthony for continuing to organize so we can meet up. My name is Murray, and my talk tonight is about array enumeration and transformation in Swift. Sounds kind of, I don't know, maybe a bit boring, so we can also call it fun with closures. And here's how we're going to go about this. So first of all, is anyone here already really dialed in with closures in Swift and used them already? And so there's, what's your name?
A little bit. Anton?
Anton. When I get stuck, we're calling on Anton over there.
I defer to something.
So you're going to know a lot about for in, for each, enumerated, map, filter, and reduce. And there's more to these map, filter, and reduce, these cool functions that are in Swift. You will know that you can use all of these without knowing anything about closures or anonymous functions. But you will know a bunch more about closures and all the shortcuts that make them really cool to use. And you will know that, syntactic sugar aside, functions and closures are the same thing in Swift. So we'll check back with this at the end and make sure that we did this. So here's how we're going to do it. We'll take a quick look back at Objective-C blocks. Anyone here use Objective-C blocks before? Yeah, there's no carrots in Swift. We'll talk for a moment about string interpolation, just in case you haven't seen that in Swift, because I'll use it a lot. This is about 1/3 slide deck and 2/3 live coding. So bear with me on the live coding, but I'll be using this string interpolation. I just want you to know what it is in case you haven't seen it. Then we'll get right into it. We'll talk about what Swift functions are, and then we'll talk about what Swift anonymous functions are. And remember, they are the same thing. They just look a little different. And then we'll look at for in, enumerated, and for each, and we'll use functions and closures with all of these, kind of repeatedly, and you might start getting tired and just say, Murray, go ahead to the next one. That's fine, do so. And then we'll look at map, filter, and reduce, and how we can use functions or closures with each of those. So interrupt me if you have a question at any time. And here's just a bit on Objective-C blocks. So here's UI views, animate with duration, animations, and completion. So the second parameter, animations, is just a chunk of code that you give to that method for it to do with what it wants, when it wants. The completion is the same thing, it just looks a little bit different because that block needs to accept the parameter. Who gives you that, who passes the parameter to that chunk of code? Anybody?
The developer.
Animate with duration does. That's the important thing to remember about blocks. You're going to create a block or a closure in Swift, and you're going to say this block or a closure takes a parameter. Somebody else is going to give you that parameter whenever it executes that. Okay, it's an important thing to think about is that all you're saying is I've got this block enclosed in curlies, designated with this caret, it takes this parameter, and I'm going to do something with it. I could, in fact, ignore it, but I need to be able to accept it. So it's important to remember who calls these blocks and when are they executed. So animate with duration calls these blocks. You're just saying here's a chunk of code. When you're ready, execute it. Who supplies the finish parameter? Animate with duration does. And it hands it to that block, and then your block runs and does whatever it needs to do. We'll see closures, blocks tonight that not only take parameters, but return parameters back to the caller. And you probably all have used this gosh darn blockssyntax.com because it's really weird in Objective-C. And there is a non-work friendly version of that URL and one for Swift as well. Here's string interpolation. So I've got an integer and I want to create a string that describes that. So I create a string, and string interpolation is nothing more than escaping the expression in parens. And it could be an expression, it could be number plus 5 in there. Whatever, it just takes that. It could be a class, and that class might have a description method. So that description will print. For an integer here, it's just going to take it and turn it into a string. It's sort of like string with format, but cleaner. So, Swift functions. They are declared with the func keyword. They have a name. They might have parameters and a return value. And they do something. In this case, we just take that int and turn it into a string and we return. Okay, that seems familiar enough to everybody, I'm sure. Anyone here not at all familiar with Swift? Never used Swift? Cool. So anonymous functions are pretty similar, they just aren't declared or named. You define the function body, what it does, enclosed in curlies. So functionally, this closure is exactly the same as the num string on the previous slide. If there are parameters and or a return type, you put them in the first line, followed by in. So that's, everything's enclosed in the curlies. Parameters, return types go on the first line, and what it does goes on subsequent lines. And it could be many lines long. They're usually not, but they can be. And informally, they're called closures. The anonymous function is sort of the formal name for this. All right. So now let's look at how we can use some of this stuff. And for-in is the most basic array enumeration method. And it's a lot like it was in Objective-C. So we've got an array of integers called numbers. And I'm just going to go for number in numbers print number. And number there could be anything. You could say for x. Doesn't matter. It's just where you're going to grab the element from the numbers array for each iteration. So simple as that. For each is one of these functions that's built into Swift. It's functionally equivalent to for-in, but usually there's less code. For each takes one parameter. A function, which you'll see can be a function or an anonymous closure, and does not return a value. So it looks like this. We've got an array of integers, numbers.forEach, and you put your function there, something that you want for each to do. And the function you pass must accept one parameter, which will be an element from your array, and it must match the type of the objects in the array, obviously. So sort of in pseudocode, it looks like this. So numbers.forEach repeats for each element. It passes element to your function. You do whatever you want with it, and that's it. You might print it. You might start some background thread for something, whatever. You're just going to do something that doesn't need a return value. All right, so let's take a look at what we can do here. So I've got this extra large playground that's kind of preset, and we're just going to fill in everywhere where it says code here, basically. So this numbers array, we're going to use it a lot. It's just an array of integers. And we'll take a look first at forIn and forEach. So I have a function. It's declared. It has a name. It takes an int and returns nothing, or more technically, void. And it does something. It creates this string called hello, or hello1, hello2, hello3, and so on. And it just simply prints it. So that's what it does. So let's take a quick look at forIn calling that function. It's just simply this. Hello a number, and we pass in number. And let's run this. There's going to be a lot of output from this. And there it is. Okay. So there's hello, or forIn calling this function that we happen to have. So let's see what happens with forEach. So forEach looks a bit different. It's numbers.forEach. And I'm gonna hit return here, but I'm never gonna expand. I'm always gonna start from scratch. But I want to show you this. For the moment, ignore the throws. So the parameter that forEach expects, internally it's called body. And we can tell that it expects a function because it says it's something that takes an int and returns void. So that's a function type. So this one needs to take an int. Why does it know that it takes an int? Because obviously forEach can work with anything.
Numbers is an array of integers.
Exactly. Right. So wouldn't it be handy if we had a function that took an int and didn't return anything? Can anyone predict the output here?
Same thing.
Same thing. So what I want you to make sure is clear is that in the forIn loop, we're calling hello number, and we're passing the parameter. We are in control. We're doing this ourselves. With forEach, all I'm saying here is, here's a function that's the right type. And that's it. So each iteration, forEach passes in this int and does what this function does. Okay? So it's important to make that distinction between how these two things work. All right, but do I really need to create a function for whatever I'm doing with forEach? Is there another way? Yes, we can use an anonymous function. All right, so numbers.forEach. All right, so I'm going to start from scratch, and we said earlier that the closures are enclosed in curlies. And we know that parameters need to be expressed in the first line. Is this closure that I'm going to write need to accept a parameter?
Yes.
We'll call it number. You can call it whatever you want. Does it return anything? No. So of course I could leave that blank. But I'm going to say, and there's our in keyword. And then, yes?
For an anonymous function without any parameters, do you still write int? I don't think I've ever.
I think if it returns something, you need in.
Okay.
But I'm going to show you in a moment where you don't need to use in, and that might answer your question.
Just a stylistic question. You know, you use 2 parentheses for void. That seems confusing to me because that's almost like a function signature. You know, it's almost like it's a function that doesn't take any parameters that also returns void. Right? I'm just wondering why you do that instead of writing the word void.
This is just more Swifty.
Okay.
This way void is more Objective-C.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's just a style thing. And this, for the matter, doesn't even need to be there.
If it's void, you don't even have to put any
Right.
return.
If you're declaring a function that doesn't return anything. We're going to see how, I'm writing this one with no shortcuts whatsoever. Where you want to get to with closures is knowing and understanding all the shortcuts. That's where the sweetness is with all of these things. And we'll back this one down to all the shortcuts in a moment.
So, what's a logical explanation for like the grammar of that? Like the in? Like is it just because it's like for in? It's like
no, it's got nothing to do with that. It's just
in?
you need a keyword to say the rest of this is the actual closure. So this is just a Swift keyword.
Because if I was naming it, I would like call it like do or something.
I wish it did like a JavaScript with the arrow or something. I hate.
Yeah,
I
mean, just it's the Swift syntax, and there's not much you can do about it. 99% of the time, you're not going to write this line anyway. So you'll probably never see this in keyword in your own. There's a good chance you won't ever have to type it.
Sorry, this is my last question. I know you're going to get to the rest of your talk.
That's
good.
fine.
So it's going well so far. Does the parameter have to be? It's been so long since I really did a lot of Swift, but I know that most parameters have to be named. But does the one that you're passing into the closure also have to be named, or can it be just? Can you just pass in like a type?
If you're declaring it here, it has to have a name, I think.
Okay.
You might be able to use the
like
underscore.
An underscore.
I haven't tried that.
Okay.
Actually, because like I'm going to get to, most of the time you're not going to use this inline.
Right.
Okay, this is sort of the full-on syntax, and my goal at the end of this is for you to say, well, that's a lot like writing the original function, and it's kind of awkward, and that's kind of what I want to show here, is that this is kind of awkward. So what are we going to print here? We're going to print a string, and it's going to say hello. And how do I make use this thing called string interpolation, right? And now we should get similar output again. All right, so there's for each with an anonymous function with no shortcuts. Sure, but that's just about as much typing as a regular function. Can it be simplified? Yes. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it down here, and we'll work through these numbered shortcuts. So you can omit the return type because it's known to the compiler. Does the compiler know that this returns nothing? It does. Okay.
So if you run it now,
It'll run.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do it for each one. There will be no errors here. Yeah. So number 2, omit the inline if there are no parameters. But alas, we have a parameter. We'll come back to this. Omit the parameter types. Can I do this? Does the compiler know that that's an int?
Yeah.
Yes. I could run this again and we wouldn't have any errors. I can omit the parens around the parameter. Oh, sorry, did I? Yeah, so, yeah, oops. I can omit the parens. I'm getting a little bit cleaner here all the time. I can use what I call the magic parameter names, which are officially called anonymous closure arguments. These are the coolest thing that I think are in closures. Actually, there's a lot of cool stuff that we're not going to talk about tonight. This is just scratching the surface. So what these anonymous closure arguments are is you can access the passed in parameters by index. So the first passed in parameter is referenced by $0, and the second by $1, and so on. Now I'm going to get an error. And it says, Anonymous closure arguments cannot be used inside a closure that has explicit arguments. Well, now I can go back to number 2, and I can omit this inline. And when I run this, we're going to get it again. And lots of times, this is just style, but lots of times you'll see these closures on one line. There's one more niggly, messy bit here that can go. If the closure is the last parameter for this function, you can use what's called trailing closure syntax. So you can get rid of the enclosing parens, and it just looks like this. Now we're getting to some, reasonable syntax. For each of these numbers, print this, just like that. Now, if you just came across this and you didn't understand what $0 was and why are these braces there, and it would look a little bit weird, but you've seen how we backed this off and got down to something a lot more cleaner and a lot faster to type, and it's a lot less than the original function.
So if you had more than one parameter passed in to say like a function that took a closure as the last parameter, would you write the first few parameters just like you normally would in a function?
Yeah, and
then the return value, and then the trailing closure? Or
I'll show you. We'll get to this one.
Great.
Yeah, it'll be in the reduce,
cool,
which has more than one parameter. All the other ones just have one, so this trailing closure stuff is going to work in all of them. So pop quiz, who provides $0?
The for each function.
For each does. And when does the closure run?
For each.
When for each decides, yeah. For each iteration, it's going to just run it and pass that parameter in. Okay, you're just handing for each this chunk of code that is the right type. It takes an int and it doesn't return anything.
So how can you break this if you like change the spaces or like put a return in there or something? Or
oh yeah, if I said return this string, it would break.
No, I mean like if you like put in a new line, like if you put in like a new line anywhere there, would it break?
Yes.
No, what I meant, like if the print is on line 53 instead of on line 52.
Oh, but that's not part of the closure or anything, right?
I meant the print hello $0, like if that's on the next line, would it break it?
No.
Okay.
So you could do.
You could have multiple. You could do multiple things. You could run a whole. You could do a bunch of different things inside the.
Yeah, I could have another print in there.
So, yeah. And then so I guess so whenever it sees number.for each, it just looks for curly braces, and then it just runs whatever's in the next curly braces it finds.
Yeah. So the scope is the curly braces. That's your closure right there. Whether it's 15 lines long or all on one line, that's the scope of the closure. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Just like I have way more JavaScript experience than Swift, so I just.
It's a lot like, to me, it's a lot like a map in JavaScript, because the JavaScript function that you pass as a call, or the function as an argument to map, JavaScript will pass 2 arguments, or actually 4 arguments, I think, to that function, and you can then, so it's kind of the same thing. You just have to know the function signature.
All right. So, what if you need the index with for in or for each? If we didn't have access to it there. So there's another function called enumerated. It gives you access to the index and the value from the array in something called a tuple. So this is not all you need to know about tuples, but it's all you need to know for tonight. There's simply a container for multiple values. And the contained values are accessible by name or index. So here's what it looks like. For t in numbers dot enumerated, print t. So t is a tuple. And you're going to get something like 0, 1, the values that are in that tuple. And the first one is the index, and the second one is the element from the array. When you use for in, you can override the tuple names. So you can say for, here's my tuple with the overridden names, index and number, in numbers.enumerated, print, index, and number. Either way, you've got access to the tuples. And then you can use it in for each. Numbers dot enumerated dot for each, print $0. What's $0?
The index. Oh,
A tuple.
A tuple.
a tuple.
Which I can reference, and I can go $0 dot something to get my index, and $0 dot something else to get the actual element. Alright, so back to the playground. So we'll look at enumerated for when you need the index. I'm going to reference the tuple and each item by index and name. So this time I'll just say for T. Numbers dot enumerated. Print T. Okay. We get some new output here in Xcode 8.3. Prior to 8.3, it just printed 0, 1. But this is a little more helpful, I think. It tells you what the names are in here. And they call the index the offset, and the element, which makes sense. So obviously here, I said you can reference them by index or by name. So by index is T.0 and T.1. And then you saw the pop-ups here, T.offset and T.element. If we run that, it'll look a little bit different. There'll be more. All right. So that's a tuple. That's how you get the offset and the element. Here I'll just show you, you can override the names. Oops. Numbers dot enumerated, don't forget that. Print, index, and element. Okay, and we run that. Obviously we're just going to get numbers, right? We won't get the names. So there it is, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, so on. So we'll do for each with enumerated, with a trailing closure and all the shortcuts right off the bat. Numbers dot for each or dot enumerated?
Enumerated.
Yeah, it's got to be enumerated first. And then look at the Xcode's help here now. It's looking a little bit different. Body is now a different type. The parens enclose the offset and the element. That says there's a tuple in there. So it's going to hand you a tuple, and it returns nothing. Just ignore the throws and the rethrows in this. Okay, I don't know why they necessarily put them there for this part, but for each, it's a trailing closure. So I'm just going to go straight to this and say print $0. And we should get something that looks like the first one. There it is.
So you can do $0.0.0?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You can do them all here. You could go $0.0.0, $0.0.1, $0.0.offset, and $0.0.element. And run that, and now it'll look just like the first one. There you go. So now you know how to access the index if you need it.
Do you know exactly what enumerated is doing to numbers that makes it change the receiver to know, like, that it knows that it's like a new function signature that, you know, like, because enumerated is a function, so it's like
it's a generic function.
Yeah, yeah. It's using Swift generics.
Oh, cool.
All of these are.
I have to like click through.
That's why for each works with ints or doubles or strings or whatever.
Right.
So somebody should give a talk on Swift generics next. And then we'll know internally how all that works. So you use enumerated when you want the index, And a tuple is just a container for multiple values, but there's a lot more to tuples, of course. All right, so now we get into the cool stuff. This is the array transformation methods, that some of them that are built into Swift. There's more than just this. So map iterates over an array, returns a new array of the same size, but not necessarily the same type. So you could map our numbers array to an array of strings. That, you know, array of sentences if you wanted it, whatever, it doesn't matter. Or you could take our numbers array and double each element in there and return that to a new array. Map takes one parameter, it's a function, and it returns a value, unlike for each. The function you pass must accept one parameter, matching the type of the objects in the array, and it needs to return a value matching the type of the new array. And map calls this function once for each item in the array. So it looks like this. For each element, map passes element to your function. Your function uses element in some way, processing, and your function returns a value back to map. Ultimately, map returns to you the new transformed array. So let's take a look at how that works. So we're going to convert an array of integers to an array of strings. And I happen to have this handy string from number function that takes an int, returns a string, and this is how it returns a string. Okay. And I have a handy array already here, ready to take the strings. It's an empty string array. So we're going to use for_in and call the function. For number in numbers. Let, I don't know, number as string equal string from number. And I pass in the number in question. And then I need to put it somewhere. Strings from numbers dot append number as string. Bingo. And I think you all can predict what we're going to see. Get it right there, this array of strings. Okay. So that's the long way. And I want to show you how to do this with map using that function that we already have. So map returns something, so we need somewhere to stuff it. So strings from numbers is where we're going to put that. Equals numbers dot map. Okay, so map takes a parameter, internally it's called transform. Forget the throws. That capital T is part of Swift generics. And I wish that in this case they knew that if that was a bit smarter, it would say it returned a string, because it knows that that array is a string. So the point is, the type of the transform parameter is a function that takes an int and returns something, specifically in this case a string. So wouldn't it be handy if we had a function that took an int and returned a string? We do. So I'm going to start sounding like a broken record here. So there's the output that you probably expected. With the for_in, we're calling the function, we're passing the parameter, we're dealing with the result ourselves. With with map, all we're saying is, here's a function of the right type. Go for it. And when you're done, stuff it into strings from numbers. So I like that a lot better than the for_in. And one of the earlier slides I said for each is, you know, it's usually less code, and that's true for all of these functions. It's usually less code than doing it the manual way. All right. So where does the return value go from string from number, because it returns a string. Where does it go?
Into the new array.
Yeah, who takes care of that?
Map.
Map does. Yeah. You just, all you're saying is here's a function of the right type. Alright. So map with an anonymous function with no shortcuts. So map returns a value, strings from numbers equals numbers dot map. Okay, so it knows that it needs to take an int and it's going to return, I wish it said string there, but it doesn't. So now we don't have our handy string from number thing, so we're going to do our own closure and we're going to do it manually. So we need to be able to accept a parameter and we're going to call it number just like everywhere else, and it's an int. And we are returning a string, and there's the silly little int. And we need to do something here. So we're going to return a string. So right there the compiler is already happy with this, but let's do something. So all I'm going to do, we want our array to be an array of strings. So remember, I just do this string interpolation magic. And that's it. No surprise on the output here. Okay, so now we have 3 ways of doing this. Okay, but that's a lot of typing. Okay. For the last time, I'm going to copy and paste because there's one more cool shortcut here that we can do that's not in the other. So the compiler knows that this thing returns a string. It knows that the parameter passed in is of type int, and so now I don't need that at all. But now number is not declared, so what can I do? $0. $0. And normally, this is completely a personal style thing, but normally you'll see this kind of thing on one line. And remember, it's a trailing closure here, so I can get rid of those, and now syntactically that's pretty tight. There's one more cool shortcut in closures. If your closure is one line and it returns, you can get rid of the return. Okay.
By trailing closure, you just mean the closure is the last thing and that.
The last parameter that the function that you're dealing with expects. Yeah. So now there you can use the trailing closure syntax. And lots of these, there's only one parameter and it's a closure, so lots of them look like this. Reduce we'll get to in a second, it doesn't look quite like this. But to me this is pretty amazing. It would be weird if you looked at this for the first time and you would go, what is going on here? Why are there braces after this function call and all of this? But now you've seen how this gets broken down, and that's pretty tight syntax.
Can you just print it straight? Like, can you just pass the function into the print instead of assigning it to that variable?
Sorry?
Can you take the numbers.map and just put that inside the print statement instead of assigning the output to string for numbers?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. You want this whole thing in there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Swift is amazing. Yeah.
Definitely concise.
Yeah, you can go a little bit crazy if you want. Alright, so back to the deck here. Now we're going to look at filter. Same kind of thing. It iterates over the array, returning a new array that is usually a subset. But it could be the entire original array or it could be empty. Depends on how filtering works in your case. So for example, we can take our numbers array and get just the evens and put that in the new array. Filter takes one parameter, a function, that returns a value. Function must accept one parameter, that's something from your array, and it returns a Boolean value. Filter calls this function once for each item in the array, and filter uses your returned Boolean value to determine whether that item is included in the new array. So it kind of looks like this. Filter passes the element to your function. Your function does some sort of test. It'll probably use that parameter in the test. It would make sense. And ultimately you return a Boolean value. And filter includes the element in result if you pass back true. And then ultimately filter returns you the new array. Alright, so let's filter out the odd numbers. I happen to have a function here called isEven that takes an int and returns a bool and returns true if the number is even. Everyone understand the modulus operator here? Anyone not seen this before? Cool. And I have a place to store our even numbers. So
Does Swift have a dot even?
Sorry?
Or is that Ruby? Does Swift have like a dot even?
It might. It might, but that would make this less interesting.
Yeah.
So and you could make a you could make
right.
a even, yeah. So for number in numbers, let number is even equal is even number. Okay, now we know whether number is even or not. So if number is even numbers dot append number. That's a lot of work. Man. So hopefully we'll end up with 246 somewhere here. And there it is, 246. Okay, does everyone see how that worked? A long way? Yep. Alright, so now we're going to use filter, but we're going to use the function we have. By the way, the reason I'm calling these functions and then doing it with an anonymous function is to show you that they're exactly the same thing. It doesn't care. It just needs something that's the right type. So filter returns something, so we need to stuff the result somewhere. Numbers.filter. Filter's parameter is called isIncluded, and I like this one better. Ignore the throws. It needs a function of the type something that takes an int and something that returns a bool. Well, handily we have one. Is even. We should end up with a second 246. Voila. This making sense? Yep. Everybody? The distinction between the two? And the second one, we're just saying, here's a function of the right type. Go for it. And that's a lot less code than the for in, even though for in is using our function. Okay. So lots of these are less code. All right. So filter with an anonymous function and no shortcuts. It's going to return a value, so we need even numbers equals numbers dot filter. We're going to start from scratch here, not cheat. It takes a parameter that's an int. We'll call it number like usual. And it returns what? This closure returns a bool. Return number mod 2 equals 0. Should work. Two, 4, 6. That makes sense to everybody? Based on what we've done so far? So I'm not going to copy and paste on this one. We're just going to go straight for it. Even numbers equals numbers dot filter. And we're going to get rid of all of this and go straight to our trailing closure. The function needs to return something, but I'm pretty sure I can get this on one line. And remember, I don't need to say return if it's on one line. So $0 mod 2 equals 0. Bang. this is where you want to get to with closures, is you want to understand all these shortcuts and just type something swifty like that instead of the long way, like this one right here. It's a little bit arduous when you know you can do this. All right, we're on to our last one, and it's the best. Reduce iterates over an array, reducing the array to a new single value. It can be any type. So here's a straightforward example. I'm just going to sum up all of those integers in the numbers array as an example. So the first, notice that reduce takes two parameters. The first is the starting point. So if I'm going to create a sum function out of this, I'm going to probably start at 0. And then the second parameter is your function that does whatever we need to do with the two numbers. I'm getting slightly ahead of myself. The second parameter is a function that takes two parameters and returns a value. Reduce calls this function once for each item in the array. And originally I had like 15 bullet points on this slide because there's a lot to reduce, but it's easier explained in this pseudocode, just like the others. So in the first iteration, reduce passes starting value as the first parameter to your function. And the second parameter is the first element from the array. You're going to do something with that, and then you're going to return a result to reduce. The second iteration, reduce takes what you returned in the first iteration and passes that as the first argument. The second argument is the second element in your array. You do something, you return a result back to reduce. It passes that result in and along with the third element in the array, and so on and so on. At the end, reduce returns to you the final result. Okay, so you can do a lot of interesting things with this. Note, starting value can be of any type. All of the results that you return and that it ultimately returns to you are the same type as starting value. The first example I'm going to give you here, it's an int. And I'll show you one right after that is not. So reduce. We're going to add the numbers in the array to get a total. We should get 28. I have a handy function here called add2. Takes two integers, adds them together, and returns it. And I have a handy variable here to store that total. So for number in numbers, let result equal add to. What am I passing in first? I need a starting value, something that currently equals 0. Total. And what am I passing in here? Number. All right. Now what do I have to do with that result?
Add it to total.
I need to make it equal to total. It's an accumulator. We already did the adding part. Right, so as you can see, I could take add2 here and stuff it right there. We'll just leave it as 2 lines for now. So let's see if we get 28. Okay. So let's use reduce and pass the function. So we need a place to store this because reduce returns a value to you. Total equals numbers dot reduce. So look at all this. It's there's 2 parameters here. They call it the initial result. I think it should be called starting value. And then the next one describes a function type that takes 2 parameters and returns something called result. Notice all of these names are the same. So this type and that type are all the same, just like in my slide deck. we're going to get rid of all of that. So reduce takes a starting value. We're starting at 0. And wouldn't it be handy if we had a function that added two numbers together? Just like that.
How are you not, I thought the Swift parameters had to be named for some reason. I thought you had to have like it was required to have a...
No, if you use an underscore.
Right, but you don't have anything that you're passing in through. I guess because those are arguments, not parameters. Never mind.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to look at...
I guess the function signature has to have.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and if we look, if we have time, we'll come back to this. And what is our time? Okay, we're doing all right, I think. Yep. Okay, so did we run this? Did we get 28? By just passing in this function? Yes. So there's 4 in. Reduce passing in the function, because we had a function that added two numbers. Okay. So remember, this just, it's looking for a function that's the right type. It takes 2 ints and returns an int. In this case, that function matches the type, and we're doing the right processing in it for our result. Having the right type is one thing, but doing what we want is another. So again, broken record. In 4 in, we're doing this all manually. We're calling, we're passing parameters, we're dealing with the result, we're accumulating. With reduce, all I'm saying is here's a function that's the right type. Go for it. Here's the starting value and here's the function that matches the type that you need. Go for it. Alright, an honest function with no shortcuts. Okay. So this is going to say total equals numbers dot reduce. So no shortcuts. So my initial starting value is a 0, and I'm not going to have Xcode fill anything out here. So this function, like my real one up above, needs to take 2 parameters, and we're just going to call them the same as what we did above. And what does this closure return? An int. In. Alright, but as you've seen, we don't need to type that very often. And what are we going to do?
Return the sum.
Number 1 plus number 2. Oh, some help with these things for Xcode. Should work. $28. Alright. But this is where you want to get to. Total equals numbers dot reduce. Now I can use the trailing closure syntax, but the first parameter is not a closure, it's something, so I have to do, oops, didn't want to do that. I have to go like this. And then I can put in the trailing closure right here. Okay? So remember, the trailing closure syntax is only for the last parameter if it is.
David's shaking his head.
I'm just like, I don't like it. I don't like it.
You don't like it?
No, I don't like it, because it's like the parentheses says that's done. It's closed, the parentheses closed. And then there's more.
More trailing stuff. All right. So what can I put here? What's the first parameter called? $0 plus $1. Do I need to say return?
Okay.
No, because there's only one line in my closure and it returns. So that's it. Okay. So I don't know, to me that's just so cool that when you learn these shortcuts and understand how these closures work and trailing closure syntax, It's pretty tight code. For a beginner who first looked at Swift, that's weird, but a few minutes of investment and reading the book, and it all makes pretty good sense. Did I run that? 28. So I'm not going to do this one, I'm just going to show you that here's another reduce example showing that the starting value can be a different type. So we're going to concatenate our numbers array into one long string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as a string. So remember I said that the starting value doesn't have to be the same type. So here we are with an empty string. And so the first time through, reduce passes this empty string right here, along with the number 1. Okay. And then we just concatenate them with string interpolation. So an empty string and 1 becomes 1 as a string. That gets returned back to reduce, which passes you but right back that result in the first parameter. So now we have a 1 and a 2. They get concatenated, passed back to reduce, passed back to you. And now you append the 3, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, so you can do whatever you need to do with this reduce. And so there's the long way, and so this should make sense now, this line here. Right? We're just concatenating $0 and $1 as a string each time through the loop. I think we want to leave some time for some socializing here after, so I'm going to skip over this one. But you can combine these. We want to sum the odd numbers. So we're going to filter and get the odd numbers, and then we're going to reduce and add them all up. So you can chain these, right? You can go map, filter, reduce, and do something else, right? You just chain them together. And now here's something that I think is pretty cool. Does this line make sense?
Yeah.
What's this?
A closure.
That's a closure. And where am I? I'm creating a reference to that closure in a constant. And then I'm saying for each, there's the constant, which points to my closure, which just is of the right type and runs.
So the type of printed is like an anonymous function that takes what? Like anything? You don't have to specify the type.
Anything.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you look at the type, like if you did a control click on printed, would it say, what would this signature look like?
Good question.
Whatever print takes, right?
Oh, okay, that kind of makes sense.
So
any.
And I guess that's what print takes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an any.
And look, they use the docs use the friggin' parentheses that goes for
Well, you see, at least that's explicit, right? Void, you hardly ever see void. I think it's legal in Swift.
Yeah.
You can say void, but you hardly ever see it. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yeah.
Right on. So finally, I just want to show you, we've been using integers and strings through this. I want to show you that this all works with classes as well. So I've got a class here called test, and it's got a student and a score and a description. And I create 3 tests, one for Bob, Joe, and Sue with different marks, and I stuff them into an array. And now I'm going to use filter to find the tests that have scores greater than 80. And this is what it looks like. What's $0?
I'll move it first.
What type is it?
Test.
It's a test. Tests have scores. And I can just test to see if this is greater than 80. So this is going to return true for Sue. Make sense? Test.filter. Here's what I want you to filter on. Bada bing, bada boom.
Could you override filter in the class definition? Or something like that? I know you can do that in Ruby. I don't know if you can do that.
I don't know.
Yeah. Why would you
Antoine? I knew we'd have to ask you something.
Yeah. I'll have to try it.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So now here's an example with reduce. And look at this closure, it's huge. Okay. So
like in tests, you mean do like override filter. Oh, sorry.
that's fine. I'm going to be done here in about a minute, and then we can ask whatever questions we want. So remember, reduce takes two parameters, the starting value, and then your closure. So in this case, and I'm using trailing closure syntax here, so we're passing in test 0 as the starting point. It's a bit redundant, and I know this isn't the best example because what if you had two tests that had the same score? Whatever. It's just an example, and I wanted to show you the output from this example, and kind of hoping everybody can read the output in the console. So the first time through, oops, do this again carefully. Can everybody read that? I want to be able to see the whole chunk of code here. So the first time through, $0 is Bob, because we're passing in here test 0. And of course, $1 is Bob, so Bob's going to have the higher score. And so we return Bob. We do our test here. Who has the higher score? $0 or $1? Okay, well, they're the same. So the ternary operator has a way to deal with that. And Bob gets returned. So Bob gets passed in as the first parameter on the second iteration, along with Joe, the second element in the array. Who's got the higher score? Joe does. So Joe ends up as the first parameter in the third iteration, along with Sue. And who has the higher score? Sue. And ultimately we print best test, where we stuffed the result from reduce, got stuffed into best test, and we print it, and it was Sue. Any questions about using classes with this stuff? Makes sense. All right. So, have you seen enough of for in and for each, and enumerated, and map, and filter, and reduce? And you now know how all of those work, and you know that they all work without closures. We can pass a function that we've already created, so you don't have to know anything about closures if you don't want to. Syntactic sugar aside, functions and closures are exactly the same thing, as far as Swift is concerned. And you have seen closures and the cool shortcuts that make them so awesome to use. There's way more to closures, like capturing and all of that stuff that somebody can do a talk on that next time. I can't recommend Matt Newberg's books enough if you haven't discovered Matt. He writes about these complicated things and makes it fairly easy to understand. And you can find stuff on map, filter, and reduce and closures all over the internet. So just Google map, filter, and reduce or whatever, and there's a couple of examples there. And that's it. Thanks for your time. I hope you learned something. I'll leave those up if anyone wants.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for presenting. So we have the room for another about 15 minutes or so. Encourage people to hang around and network a little bit. I know we have some developers here looking for work and or available for work, and I know probably a lot of people with things they need built. Next month we're going to have IBM presenting Katura, which is Swift for server technology. If you're at the show and tells, he's giving like a more in-depth presentation on that. And then in June we might have a special sponsored meetup. More on that to come. And we're always looking for new topics and presentations to give. So if anybody has like an app they're building they want to show off, let me know and we'll get you on the schedule. That's good. So thanks for presenting, guys, and feel free to hang out. Right on. Is that cigarette?
It's a business.
The state in Germany.
So you're a developer? Nice.
Using any of that in their, in
What
some
you working on right now?
video code?
Whenever it's possible.
Last one?
I found a forum to do like
Probably one I haven't real code.
Let me know when you find those things.
Oh, they're always there. I saw like you guys working on
You're like a travel hacker.
I saw like
Coding.
616?
Costs money for the
And,
I got next Friday.
oh, yeah. Putting up like the.
Just Taipei or?
Taipei and
So, what I was trying to do was, bridge in a Swift.
Thanks for getting me on top, man.
Yes, you have to study every day.
While he's out of town.
Oh.
I can go on vacation and give me questions.
Now,
If you have questions.
Well, the funny thing is, like, the other developer, like, he's gonna be a coach at the time.
Weird. You met up with, what's his name in England too? Nacho. Did you ever talk to Nacho?
I was around right when he was around.
A lot of love his name was Nacho. And he was a badass developer.
right,
I think he just
In fact, the company.
Jojo might be over at my
he's gonna be in
Yeah, I've never.
lots of
No, I don't have cards. Yeah, I have like
Well, I can always message you.
he's out.
Yeah.
really
I like it. So you just doing like independent stuff, or have you?
So I'm freelancing right now. I have two friends who run their own agencies. One guy's like New York City, one guy's Florida. I've kind of like helping them out with what you're doing. Like get my hands on it.
Initial investment.
But I've already gotten a couple clients in Austin, so we'll see where it goes. So marketing.
Do you also build digital handler with them?
Advertising. Big two is just advertising.
How do you guys, I was wondering, it seems like a bitch to test.
Companies that like maybe do
Because like if it was like a 53-page PDF, like how do you guys like verify that it's like at the end when you finish the advertising? Yeah. So you use this like when you first. And did you ever get like burned by it? Like when it was just,
I remember
like were you ever like the first time you used it? It was always hard in the beginning.
One industry that you cannot make any mistakes.
just like never really knew it.
Yeah, that's why that seems like the hard part is like making sure you don't like have any mistakes.
You make a mistake, probably not a government will charge you a fine for it. It goes from 5,000 to 25,000.
So how do you guys do that? So
$1,000 to $10,000 a month, but they're probably
they can't just be like, oh, we were careful.
10x that. And travel with their song back. So.
If
I don't know. There's just lots of them. Like, so.
if you don't have all the
So there's another meetup that I'm running, and just join
all the
another
fields you see there,
meetup organization that's.
But you guys built this, like you went through like the applications and you custom like, because I assume the applications themselves are like in paper format. So you like figured out what fields you guys like manually go through. That seems like the part, that's like the scary part to me, because that seems like error prone. own.
You're part of just
Oh, you did that over 4 years time?
What I found.
Oh shit.
For a
Kind of like stuff like this, like meet up.
There's a bill for the
I
family.
Going on
think it would be really fun to
I started doing that.
like road trip or
I
something.
was using the database, so I decided to post it about myself.
Yeah, I think it's kind of can be enforced to do like a share plane with like some people.
We also got a handful of other ones that we always want
Gotcha.
to
So you've been like paper into like
We're working with their same thing here.
Yeah.
How they handle business.
about the
invention. Just being a pilot.
And I think I'm hoping that once I get some customers, like we're gonna fly with. Yeah.
I'm in it.
And I'm a lazy dude.
yeah, that's
Works a bit for me when I was the handler. That's what it means. I'm just trying to reach the place that
There are also
on an island.
I've actually found
That's fun, margarita. That's what I do.
So I've run into a few of them. They're like hard to get. Like they'll contact me and I'll be like, yeah, I can
if it takes off.
I think we're pretty strong, like Amazon is open an office here. Facebook has a bunch of offices. They're moving downtown to like, I think like 100,000 square downtown. Apple has their second biggest office. That, and then there's startups, there's here Capital
There's like one place like
there's probably like close to 100 startups.
you know enough people that like, oh yeah, I know. And then like when it goes up to
They started, I think, about 5 years ago with the 16th floor. They now have the 7th, 5th, and 1st floors.
And it's kind of like the Jackson
startup crawl.
If you want to pick a certain niche to focus on, niche or that technology, what it is, like the more you can hone in on it,
All the
the
countries
easier it
have
is to
There's thousands of people just like within walking software developers.
And I've seen.
in like mobile development. I can do everything.
Aside from those like Amazon.
Yeah, most of downtown. There's also a lot
most people that
systems for software development.
Yes.
that's where
There's AngelList, and then there's always crap ton of
They use the
gigs and stuff.
a bunch of
Yeah, it's like
companies like founded like in the 90s and 2000s that are kind of so like $100 million, $500 million revenue. And you also have Slimy Domain, that's kind of like a new area.
Yeah, totally
And
now.
you get like Samsung,
Other
like chip
than that,
makers and stuff
like,
You'll have like
global
maybe
there.
1 week you'll have like 7 from like 4 projects going on, you're kind of developing, and then next week you have like